I was working on a video about how to play Clocks by Coldplay on piano, and I had a thought. Could ChatGPT fill in any of the music theory details that I might have missed or forgotten about? Well, that was a massive mistake because ChatGPT is awful at music theory. No exaggeration there. And I'm going to show you in this video exactly what it said that was just completely off base. But I thought to myself, okay, let's give it another chance to see if it can actually get this right. And I gave it Pompeii and I gave it Mr. Blue Sky, which are two songs with plenty of documentation on the internet about the theory and the chords and things. And it went 0 for 3. It was wrong on every single song. I also tried Grok and Meta AI, which both had their own issues but did significantly better. All this got me thinking about AI in general, and it raised a lot of questions for me. So that's why I'm making this video. And I'm going to divide it into two parts. The first part, I'm just going to talk you through all the stuff that ChatGPT and Grok and Meta AI got wrong about the music theory questions that I asked it that really should not have been that hard. So I hope that you're able to learn a little music theory along the way. And then for the second part, I'm going to discuss these AI systems and why I think the music theory went wrong and why they may or may not be able to improve it dramatically or at all in the near future. All right, so I asked ChatGPT to describe the harmonic shift that happens on the song Clocks from the first set of chords to the second set of chords. And what it said was, oh yeah, those 6 chords that you said are correct and are diatonic to the key of E flat major. And immediately we have to stop because 3 of the chords are not diatonic. What is diatonic? It means that if you're in a scale, such as E flat major, all the notes in the chords have to be found in the scale. And for 3 chords, it's not true. B flat minor, for D flat major, and for G flat, they all have at least one note that's outside of the E flat major scale, this D flat. But there's a twist here because we're not in E flat major. We are in E flat mixolydian, which is like the E flat major scale, but it has a lowered 7th. That D flat instead of D is what actually happens in the song. So you would think, okay, well, that solves the problem. But even then, G flat is not diatonic. G flat's not in the scale. So not only is the scale wrong and the description of the diatonic chords wrong, but also the bridge, it gets wrong because it says it's in the key of A flat, which it is not. It's not centered around A flat, and you can watch this in my Clocks video, but it's actually the weakest resolution probably out of it. So it does like... and it wants to end there is what they're saying, and that just doesn't feel resolved to me at all, and it's because I think the F doesn't let it resolve very well. So that feels like more of a resolution, or you could do that, but that doesn't really feel like it's in the song. So I think I came to the conclusion that G flat was the best resolution. Can I also just say that after all this happened, I gave ChatGPT one more chance to get the chords right, just to see if it could get the chords without me telling it what the chords were. It was bad. All right, so let's take a look at Pompeii, which is a song I know pretty well. Honestly, I know all these songs pretty well at this point. First of all, ChatGPT says Pompeii is centered in E flat major, but is strongly modal, leaning heavily on mixolydian. None of that's true. It is not in the key of E flat major. It's in the key of A major, and it's not modal. It's using a normal major scale. Modal implies it's something like Lydian or Phrygian or whatever. That's not true. And then under core chord progression, they say the main loop is E flat to B flat, C minor, A flat, which isn't right, even if you do account for the fact it's an A. If you like just changed keys. That's not the right chord progression still. And those Roman numerals are not wrong because it starts on the 4 chord, 1, minor 6, and then the 5 chord. So it's everything so far is just completely off base. And if even when we look at the later stuff, I found number 7 in particular to be kind of interesting because it says you don't need extensions, which extensions are 9ths, 11ths, 13ths. And the first thing that the melody does, like the very first note is a ninth. They sing the ninth and they're playing a chord underneath it, which is really cool, but I don't even. So I also asked Grok and Meta AI about Pompeii, and Grok flipped around the first 2 chords, which was kind of interesting. So instead of a 4 chord to a 1 chord, D chord to A, what Grok said was it was A to D, but it was in the right key at least, and the last 2 chords were actually good. And it also did say a couple dubious things. I think the one that I really noticed was, oh, it's primarily in the pentatonic. Well, everything's in the pentatonic in pop music. That's like kind of its deal. But I don't even know if that is a good characteristic or a characterization of it because there's a lot of fourths and sevenths, which are in the major scale, but not in the A pentatonic that the song uses, and they're very distinctive, important notes. So saying, oh, it's largely pentatonic, well, that's because that's 5 of the 7 notes in the major scale in this case. So I'm not sure that's a great thing to point out. But it did include a lot of interesting information. I think generally it was good. And Meta AI actually, I think, got basically everything right on this one. So it is possible. It is possible. All right, let's go back to ChatGPT and talk about Mr. Blue Sky. And let me tell you, this one went way out of its way to be terrible. So let's look at the verse. ChatGPT says a common accurate reduction of the verse is F major to A minor, D minor, B flat. Okay. At least it knows it's in the key of F major, I guess. But they missed the E minor chord. There's G chords in there. It's a weird form. It goes through a set of 4 measures 3 times, so that B flat doesn't even happen towards the very end of all of that, which is like, so it goes on a long time. So for the B flat to be right in the middle of that chord progression is really absurd. Yeah. And it says verse takeaway is important. The verse feels joyful because it stays fully diatonic, and that's not right. It's based on the chords it gave, it worked, but it's clearly just saying, oh, these are very common chords in pop songs, so this must be true. And we'll see later that that is the answer that ChatGPT gives for reasons why it gets this completely and utterly wrong. So, yeah, the actual chords, not diatonic for a lot of them. Really cool chord progression. And then we get to the chorus, and here's a common functional reduction, and it's just like off immediately. We're just not on the right chords. It's just straight up. It starts D minor. So I'm not even going to get into that too much, but at this point, it's very clear you cannot trust what ChatGPT is saying in this current version. You can't trust it. Okay, well, let's look at the other 2 because I'm going to lose my mind if I keep looking at these ChatGPT chats. But Meta AI doesn't quite get it right, but it's actually pretty close, at least on the verse. I'm not sure that the chorus is all that accurate, but it does better, I guess. What's amazing to me is that this is actually a fairly complicated song compared to the other 2. And Grok does an amazing job with it. It talks through the chord progressions. It even layers them out in a way where you can kind of see where the chords come into rhythm. So ChatGPT fails on all 3 fronts. Meta AI doesn't do great on Mr. Blue Sky, but it does pretty well with Pompeii. And Grok does pretty poorly with Pompeii, but it does well with the most complicated out of the three, I guess. So here we are. The first thing that matters here is understanding what ChatGPT actually does. This won't be overly specific and technical because I don't have the time to get a PhD in this subject. And large language models and specific neural network architecture is very complicated. Also, try saying that 5 times fast. I've been tripping over that set of words, specific neural network architecture. Anyway, ChatGPT is not hand-coded. It's not following a big list of rules. At its core, it is a text predictor. It's predicting what it thinks should come next. So for something like mathematics, it's not necessarily using the number system and concrete logic. It's using people's words about that logic, which is kind of a weird system when you think about it. It's been trained, ChatGPT, on just a massive amount of data that uses the training to estimate what should come next, is the prediction part of it. And then it pieces it together to sound coherent. And it's actually surprisingly effective at this. I think at this point, you could probably see the mismatch between ChatGPT being a text predictor and it trying to understand music. It's simply not listening to the audio. It doesn't understand chords and voicings. It doesn't understand tension and release. All it has is the textual representations of a song. So that could be chord charts or analyses, forum posts, user-generated scores. Let's get into specifics. So if you've ever been on ultimateguitar.com, there are many, many different versions of a particular song, some of which are much better than others. That's just how it works. And so songs are often transposed into different keys. So we're in the key of E flat, for example, for the original song. And they say, okay, well, for piano players, maybe it's easier to be in the key of C. The thing is, when you're in the key of E flat and you use the chords that are found within the E flat scale, you can't play those at the same time as the chords found in the C scale. They're going to conflict. They're not going to sound good. And so when you get different versions that are valid on their own but don't mix well, if ChatGPT is piecing all this information together, it's not going to work. It's going to come up with something that maybe it realizes, oh, this seems weird and off. And then at that point, it just says, well, let's come up with a coherent story to try and make it sound like it makes sense. And that is why they just make up chords. Another example on Ultimate Guitar is capos for guitars. So you might be playing with a capo, which is you put it on the fretboard, and what it does is it moves all the sound up from where it would have been. And you might use an E guitar shape, and you might call it an E shape, but ChatGPT would read it as an E chord when in fact it's almost certainly not an E chord. Just to demonstrate real quick, if we have an E minor chord, that's the chord shape. And if you do the same thing, but you have a capo here, I'm just going to use my finger, and you do the same idea. Sorry, I haven't used this guitar in a while, but you might write it as an E minor chord, but with first capo, but it's an F minor chord. It's not the same thing. So it's going to create an information that seems like it conflicts with the other information that's written on, say, the piano chart, because it doesn't quite have the understanding that, oh, a capo changes this. So it's kind of a complex system where you have to know each individual instrument, and it gets very messy. Another website that I think is great is MuseScore, which has user-generated scores like notes on the staff. And I use this a lot, but the way I use it is I pick a song that I want to use for a student, and I download it, and very often I'll have to clean it up because a lot of details are wrong. And so I'll do that, and I'll maybe simplify it to make it easier for a student or whatever. So it saves me a ton of time, but it's the information that's found on those scores is sometimes pretty off, and I have to go in and fix it quite a bit. So if it's looking at this sort of thing, you're going to get a lot of information incorrect from it. And I don't know that ChatGPT can read notes on the staff. In fact, I'm pretty sure it can't at this point. Although, again, we don't know for sure. But if it's getting information from sites like these, there's going to be a lot of mistakes, which has been seen in a lot of the analyses that we've been seeing so far. And it's worth noting that I actually asked ChatGPT like what sources it's using, and its response was it doesn't know which patterns came from careful analysis and which came from simplifications, and it couldn't tell me the sources. And it's like, okay, that's so. I'm speculating here. I'm guessing at the sort of sites that it's going to be using, but I really don't know where it is getting its information from and how it's piecing it together. And I don't think there is a way for me to know at this point. So if anybody has information about that, get in the comments. But yeah. Anyway, all that to say that ChatGPT might be getting conflicting information that it doesn't understand how to suss out. I've got a very dramatic dog back there. That it doesn't know how to suss out, so it creates a coherent story based on the patterns that it knows to work, and it gives really crappy recommendations for what the chords are. So I think that's where we land at. I think the next piece we need to discuss is asking why doesn't ChatGPT spend more time trying to get it right? Music theory isn't particularly controversial in basically every case. Like, there are right and wrong answers almost every time. I mean, there's some areas where there's some subjectivity, but generally speaking, the chords are the chords. Like, you can quantify it, you can figure it out. And we also know that ChatGPT does slow down and make sure it gets it right with certain topics like mathematical proofs, coding logic, legal instructions, and like medical dosing, because these are high risk topics. So if you get a medical dosing wrong, that's real bad. Also, don't use ChatGPT for your medical dosing. Talk to a doctor. I feel like that seems like pretty common sense. But at the same time, I will say that it's good that ChatGPT prioritizes these other topics, because I would rather have those be correct than the chords to my song be correct. But I think it could spend more time. So I guess the question becomes, how resource intensive is it to do that extra work? And for whatever reason, OpenAI doesn't think getting it right is worth those extra resources, at least at this time. So to sum it all up, ChatGPT doesn't listen to the audio, meaning it has to focus on text prediction, which is the whole point of what it's doing. It also doesn't do very well in verifying the accuracy of information about music theory, like it would for what it considers more important topics. And there's apparently enough bad or conflicting information out there that ChatGPT is using, so that it gets a lot of the theory wrong. Like all of the theory wrong, just about. It was bad. I think in a year it has the potential to be quite a bit better, but until AI can directly assess the audio itself, this is probably going to be a recurring problem. Honestly, it makes me feel a lot better about my own theory knowledge and desire to spread accurate information on the internet, and I hope it encourages you all to continue learning and to fight misinformation, which feels so rampant nowadays. I'd love to hear from you in the comments about your thoughts, especially if you think I maybe misrepresented something or some detail about something I didn't really dive into that is relevant. If you enjoyed and made it this far, subscribe and share the video with someone you think who might be interested in the topic. Finally, as always, progress takes time. Keep going. It's worth it.